Let's end this chapter by discussing some influences on prenatal development. So we'll talk about some general risk factors that can affect prenatal development. We can really think about three very general risk factors. So nutrition, stress, and age. Let's start with nutrition. The mother is the developing child's sole source of nutrition. So a pregnant woman should increase both her calories and nutrient intake, including proteins, vitamins, and minerals. And this is essential for normal prenatal development. This is why it's so important for women to be taking a prenatal vitamin. With adequate nourishment, the infant is likely to be born maturely and at the proper weight, and thus they're less vulnerable to illness. Next is stress. Stress refers to a person's physical and psychological responses to threatening or challenging situations. And stress can cause harm when experienced early in pregnancy. Increased stress in a pregnant woman can reduce the flow of oxygen to the baby while increasing its heart rate and activity level. Stress can also weaken a pregnant woman's immune system, making her more susceptible to illness. And then also, if you think about maybe yourself being stressed, when you're really stressed out, you might engage in behaviors that aren't as healthy. So pregnant women under stress, they might be more likely to smoke or drink alcohol and less likely to rest, exercise, or eat properly. And then the last general risk factor is age. So the mother's age can have an impact on prenatal development. Teenagers and older women experience pregnancy differently. So prenatal development is most likely to proceed normally when women are between about 20 and 35 years old, when they're healthy, when they eat right, they have good health care, and they lead lives that are free of chronic stress. So compared to women in their 20s, teenage girls are more likely to have problems during pregnancy, labor, and delivery. Women in their 20s, we do see, tend to be more fertile than those in their 30s. And then once women hit 35, the risks of miscarriage and stillbirth do increase. Another thing that you guys should also be aware of, though, is that many of the studies that have looked at age as a risk factor are really based off of much older studies. They're actually based off of French birth records from I think it was 1865. And so we do see that now there's definitely a rise in children, in firstborns being born to older mothers, and even secondborns being born to older mothers. So this means that women are actually having their first child past age 35 and even a second child past that age, which means they're probably having a second child past age, 30, 37 or even into their 40s. So it still is definitely possible for women to get pregnant after age 35. The idea really is that if there's an issue getting pregnant, like some type of fertility problem, it takes time to diagnose that. And then it's also true that in vitro fertilization, that's going to be less effective for women who are older. So take a second and think about what pregnant women are told to avoid. So think about different types of teratogens. These can affect prenatal development. So a teratogen is an agent that causes abnormal prenatal development. And most teratogens fall into one of three categories: drugs, disease, or environmental hazards. So drugs would be like alcohol, aspirin, excessive amounts of caffeine, nicotine. Disease would be things like AIDS, rubella, syphilis. So what we see is that, and then environmental hazards or environmental teratogens can be the most damaging because people are actually unaware of their presence in the environment. So teratogens, the impact of teratogens really depends on the genotype of the organism. So the period of prenatal development, when the organism is exposed to the teratogen, and the amount of exposure. So the impact of teratogens will change throughout prenatal development, and different teratogens affect different specific aspects of prenatal development. So their effect is really dependent on their dose, and their impact might not even be evident until later in life. So many infants are exposed to general risks and multiple teratogens. It's often challenging for researchers to determine the harm associated with individual teratogens. So a good policy for pregnant women is to avoid diseases, drugs, and environmental hazards the best that they can.